I will share links to post on each one of these platforms. So if you want to also engage in the chat outside of the webinar here, you can do it by commenting on the post on these social media platforms. Okay, so tonight, what I've been doing, like Diana was saying earlier, is I'm collaborating with experts from around the world to really apply our knowledge of emotional intelligence and human-centered leadership to train leaders to be more human. So basically, he's using the components, human components such as empathy, compassion, understanding, interest in other people, giving second chances, generosity, and all of those human components to have leaders that can have better workplaces. So tonight, what I want to share with you are a few best practices for leveraging emotional intelligence in human-centered leadership. So why don't we just get started? This is we have a lot to go through, and this is there's a lot of information that I could share, and we only have 90 minutes, so I'm going to get right into it. So I'll start just by saying or talking about what emotional intelligence is. I know you've heard a lot about emotional intelligence. You've read a lot about emotional intelligence. Some of you likely know a lot about emotional intelligence. There are many authors that describe it in different ways, but I'm going to use this very, very simple description of emotional intelligence. I know you can read it because it's up on the screen, but I'm going to read it for you so that we read it together. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of our emotions, number one, regulate them, motivate ourselves, and leverage empathy so that we can have effective social relationships. So I'm going to go through each one of those things in a moment. And tonight, I want to convince you that emotional intelligence is actually a leadership skill that not only can be learned, but it should be practiced and it can be developed. And that is one of the questions I get all the time, whether you can learn emotional intelligence or if you're just born with it. So let's go right ahead and study each one of these 5 components of emotional intelligence. The first 3 components of emotional intelligence are about ourselves. So self-awareness. Self-awareness is the ability that we have to understand ourselves, to look at ourselves from the outside in. Who are we? How do we come across? What are the things that we say? What do we do? What are our emotions? How do we react to things? How do we come across? How do other people see us? When we have a low self-awareness, it could be that there is something about ourselves that everyone else sees, but we don't see, right? So as a leader, if you have those blind spots, it means that there are things about your behavior, the things you say or do, that other people see, but you yourself are unable to see them because you have low self-awareness. Self-regulation is the ability that you have to control your emotions, your feelings, your behavior, and you can actually have a better and more thoughtful and more conscious behavior by having self-regulation. For example, have you ever had a situation where you have put your food in your mouth and you've said something that you're like, oh my gosh, what did I just say? I'm so sorry, that came out wrong. And you're like, you don't know what to do. That's because that happens usually when you have a low level of self-regulation. For example, you have a thought and you have those thoughts connected directly to your words. And when you think of something, you go right ahead and you say it without any, what some people call filters. So self-regulation gives me the ability to create a pause, for example, between what I think and what I say. So even if I have a thought and I have this temptation to say it, I have the self-regulation to control myself and not say it if it is not appropriate to say it. And that's just one example. We'll have more during today's presentation. The third one from the family of self is self-motivation. Self-motivation is for us to do things, to accomplish things, we need the energy, we need the willingness, we need the disposition to want to do something. And many times, for many people, that energy and the wanting to do things come from an outside motivation. For example, when we are children, our parents need to be telling us, hey, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. And sometimes it can be in the form of a threat. If you don't do your homework, you're gonna need to, so that's an external motivation. But many experts say that the people who are very successful in many fields, they actually have a higher level of self-motivation, which means that they didn't really need someone to be telling them what to do, but they develop that energy and that willingness and that desire to accomplish something from their inside. For example, if you think of Michael Jordan, if you think of Michael Phelps and some of those, famous athletes that have achieved, amazing things, they didn't really have people after them saying, you gotta be Michael Jordan, please, you gotta work on this, you gotta be successful. But they themselves woke up every morning and they wanted to work, to practice more hours. They wanted to, study more. They were looking at the, they were paying attention to their coaches, and they were practicing because they themselves had the self-motivation to move forward. So we'll talk more during today's presentation about why self-motivation is important. The fourth component is empathy, and that is such an important component that I'm going to dedicate a whole slide for it, the next slide. So I'm going to skip it for now, and then I'll talk about it. And the last one is that when we use self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-motivation together with empathy, we can have better social skills, which is our ability to interact with other people and establish relationships that are more effective, right? So let's talk about empathy. I am about to I'm showing you the longest definition of empathy that you will ever see in your life. You will never in the rest of your life see another definition of empathy that is longer than this. This is the longest. And you can read it yourself because it's on the screen, but I want to read it. I want to read it with you all because we're going to talk about each one of its components. So it says, this comes from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it says that empathy is the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another, of either the past or present, and I actually argue that in the future as well, without having the feelings, thoughts, and experience fully communicated in an objectively explicit manner. I'll tell you, you won't see anything longer than this, but it is a perfect definition. There are many definitions out there and many are shorter, but I love this one and I chose it for you. And I did it because we're going to talk about each one of those components during today. But here is a shorter definition. Basically, empathy is to feel in union with another person, even if that person does not provide all of the details, and regardless of whether the situation of that person reflect your own situation or not. Now, one of the things that is interesting and I want to talk to you about tonight is that to increase your level of emotional intelligence and your empathy, we need to unlearn some of the things that we've been learning, and we need to learn some new things. We need to basically retrain ourselves to forget about some of the things that people have taught us and that we have learned. And we have to, what I'm going to propose to you tonight is I'm going to offer you some alternative behaviors that you will need to put energy to do, because they are actually not the default behaviors that you will have. So basically you will have to work hard to do something different than what you would normally do in automatic pilot. So one of the things that people have trained us to do is that they have told us to be self-focused. When we ask somebody out there how to be successful, when we are at work and we ask a leader how to be successful, many coaches out there and many leaders will tell you, The trick to success, the ticket to success is focus on yourself, focus on yourself, focus on yourself. And what happens after years and years and years of hearing, focus on yourself, focus on yourself, focus on yourself, we end up being very focused on ourselves. So what happens is we love ourselves, we love our world, we love who we are, and we love our universe. So what happens is that when we go out there and we're interacting with someone else, what our brain does is it does two things. One is, as the other person is talking to us, our brain is scanning what the person is telling us and is checking in to see, is there any connection between what that person is saying to me and my own world, which I love, by the way. If the answer is no, then it's not relevant. So the words go by and people are talking to me and the words are going by. If it's relevant, then there is a match. Boom. So I'm now very excited because there is a match. And now all of a sudden, the whole thing is relevant to me because it has a connection with me, with my world. The second thing that your brain does, it has an automatic fact checking process. What that means is that when people are talking to you and they're telling you something, your brain is thinking, okay, has that happened to me? How does that compare with my own lived experience? So if what the person is telling you matches what you yourself have experienced in your own life, what comes back is, yeah, that must be true. Of course. Somebody tells you, hey, you know that I saw this movie, was a great movie. You say, yeah, it's really good because I saw it, right? So if I saw it, then it's good because I saw it and I liked it too. If I hadn't seen it, then I don't know if it was good or not because I haven't seen it. I saw it, it's good, all right? So one of the problems that happens with this is that the world is so fascinating, is that something that has happened to someone that hasn't happened to you can still be true. Because for something to be true, it hasn't have to have happened to you, right? So things that haven't happened to you are true as well, if they are somebody else's reality. And this is why when somebody comes to us and tell us something, this is when your children come in and say, you know what? I don't like that teacher. I don't like that uncle. I don't like that neighbor. And you're like, oh no, come on, how are you gonna say that? You know, that's a good teacher, that's a person is great with me and stuff, because what we're doing is we're projecting. What means is that we think that what happens to us is their reality for all. But what happens to us is not necessarily the reality for everyone else. Here I have a very simple example to go over that. When someone comes to us and tell us, I am cold, your brain immediately activates a thermometer. And I check the temperature myself. So when somebody says to me, I am cold, I respond, no, it's not cold, it's warm. No, the person would say, no, hold on a second. I didn't say that it was cold. I said that I am cold, because I am not talking about how it is. I'm talking about how I am. It may be warm, but I am cold. Or sometimes when, someone says to another person, I am cold, the other person says, no, I am not cold. But it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter if you are not cold. You not being cold doesn't make me any less cold, because I can be cold independently. I don't need you to be cold for me to be cold. I can be cold when you're not cold, and I can be cold when you're hot, because I can, when we are in the middle of a lot of people, I can still feel lonely. And when there are reasons to be happy, I could still be sad, because it's something internal. It's my own reality. So what I am inviting you to do tonight is, you have to intervene with that brain, with that process in your brain that is doing that fact checking, and basically shortcut it. And you're going to say to your brain, thank you very much. I know you want to protect me, but I want to suppress that fact checking process. And I want to believe that someone is telling me something. What they are telling me is their reality and is true independently of whether it's happening to me or not. So one of the opportunities that we have with emotional intelligence is that it gives us an opportunity to better listen and to better connect. Because when people come to us and talk to us, we're going to listen actively and we're going to listen attentively. So not only we're going to listen with our ears for what they are saying, but we can also hear with our eyes. And we can also hear with our heart, because sometimes someone may be telling us something, but we could be feeling something else. And sometimes we have the intuition that they may be saying, yeah, it's all good, no problem, everything is fine. But we may be seeing with our eyes that things are not fine, or we may be feeling in our heart that something is not fine. And that is another way in which we're going to check off what is happening, not to us, but to the other person, right? And then also we have to make sure that we understand that it's about the other person so that we can manage our emotions and keep them in check. So